Another person who has our backing and is a good friend of Grassroots, I'm not going to take any more of your time. He's been here before. He will be with us for a long time to come, or else. But he always has fascinating insights. I always learn. I went to Stosky's with him yesterday and learned so much from him. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alan. I wanted to talk about your book. Okay. No, I'm not going to talk. Will you talk about your book?
Okay.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alan Martin. I know his last name. You've got your own microphone here, right? Okay, give me just a second.
Let's see if anything works here. Anything work?
I think you have to wait till he gets upstairs.
Wait for Doug to get upstairs.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, Doug. Over there?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, my book, The Obama Youth 2013, been out for a while. I've actually written a sequel. I just haven't published it yet. It's maybe the only footnoted novel you'll ever run across because it's based on fact, actual legislation that's been passed and is the law of the land now that you haven't heard about unless you read the book, unless you, most people don't know about HB 1388 and HB 245, etc., and other legislation that Obama passed, put into effect. And if it rings a bell, this is the Hitler Youth. It's modeled after the Hitler Youth. Scotty did us a little bit of good in getting the chronology of the Hitler Youth, how that came about, and we have that set up now. If we lose 2014, I've just missed it a year, I believe, but we'll get to see the implementation of a national, not only youth corps, but alternative military force in the United States. This is the law. You can look online. It's just sitting right there. You can simply read it right now if you like. So it is there. Few people have noted it. But so much for that. In my previous presentations to the group, I think I have been surprising each time, and I will be a little surprising this time. People always want an executive summary, and I always say you can't have it in advance because it's kind of odd. This is kind of an odd one, and I'll be. I've talked to much larger groups than this for 40 years. I'll be nervous today because this is a little autobiographical, and so I hate to do that. But it's very important, and some things just a little bit deep, so have your brain working. I'm a sociologist. Sociology has always been a leader in the academy, that is higher education, and the other disciplines typically have followed along for various interesting reasons. One of those reasons being sociology has been very important in the politics of the left, and of course we are deep in the politics of the left and have been substantially for a long time. The issue comes along this way, that in the late 1950s, sociology was coming to a dilemma. They were switching from a theory deeply grounded in the old Germans and French of the 19th century that we had held solid to. You might be wondering what that was. It was stimulated by Karl Marx and an opposition to the stupidity of it. Sociology has always been very clear on how just moronic, how simplistic, how off base all of that is, especially when we take it into the 20th century and then the 21st century. So that's what sociology has always been, and we have clarified that the operations of society, sociology is the study of society, are much more complex than Karl Marx ever dreamed or wanted to dream. And so that's the way it was. But starting in the late 1950s, we started to turn toward ideology, and the ideology in particular being leftist ideology. Now, that came on hard and fast by 1960, before the Watts riots, et cetera, of 1965, where we had the fundamental transformation of the United States. Sociology was in the lead on that already, if you want to call that the lead. Now, so what do we do in terms of establishing a theory that's going to cover the new ideology? Well, a man by the name of Blaylock, a professor, came up with the nuts of this, but it was a woman from UC Santa Barbara, Edna Bonasich, who took hold of it and ran it for years. All of this will be bizarre to you, and so just hang on and have your brain clicking. She came up, Blaylock and Bonasich came up with a theory of the middleman minorities. Why would this have earth-shaking implications? Well, again, click along with me. It went this way. The issue was blacks. Why are blacks not succeeding? Why do they have the various social problems that they do? Sociology had to come up with the idea, and they did, that it was not the fault of blacks that they had such internal problems in their neighborhoods and families, etc. So the idea was that it's not blacks' fault, it's the middlemen minorities' fault. Well, not their fault exactly. Whites' fault. Whites using middlemen minorities. What are the middlemen minorities? Well, those would be Asians and Jews in particular. The Asians and Jews were being used by whites to keep blacks down. Now, how does this work? Well, it's just bizarre. However, it took over sociology and had enormous impacts throughout academia and federal government and everywhere else. Again, hang on to this, even though you're saying, I can't believe it. The idea was of Jews and Asians as knuckle breakers, rent collectors, just thugs, keeping blacks down and out, away from fair rents, fair real estate values, access to jobs, etc. And so they were keeping blacks down at the behest of whites. Again, the idea being that whites were giving favors of all sorts to blacks and Jews for their aid, great aid, in keeping blacks down. All of this should strike you as particularly odd. I could get into, and maybe I will, later get into this with you greatly. Actually, at the very same time, throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, blacks and Jews were the victims of quotas much more than whites in general. And again, I have great information on that and get into great specifics with it. Now, again, all of this is just bizarre. Now, why is it, how could it be that blacks are such easy victims of people who are really quite distant from them in their ordinary ghetto issues? Again, the ghetto has always been the quintessential thing to focus on for affirmative action and other issues. And but that is the idea of the focus of sociologists at the time very, very clearly. Well, the answer to that is the idea that blacks have no agency. That's really a very California term, isn't it? What is no agency? That is that blacks have no ability to do anything for themselves, protect themselves, or advance anything. And so the idea being that their agency was taken away from them entirely. However, there's a very important reason for blacks not to have any agency. That means that blacks are necessarily entirely innocent. This would be innocent in the Shelby Steele sort of idea that blacks are totally innocent and thereby have all the advantage in argumentation over whites. As I go, whites backtrack entirely when they are in arguments with blacks over social conditions and such. It's a long story. You need to read Shelby Steele's various works, many, many works. Again, it's a little bit deep. But it's really quite simple on the other hand, once you get the idea. So again, let's note then that whites are monsters. And not only that, very, very clever monsters, because they don't want to do the dirty work themselves directly, but rather to have the middlemen minorities do that work for them. The middlemen minorities also include immigrant workers, and in particular, immigrant entrepreneurs. Okay, so the bizarrity of all of this, again, probably has you saying, what's going on here? Well, it had us going on, that is three of us at the University of Texas in the 1970s. Professor Alejandro Cortes and a graduate school colleague of mine, Ken Wilson, and I, we played chess every day as we had lunch, and we worked on this whole issue that I'm discussing with you here. And in particular, the issue is that the Jews and Asian issue is in their entrepreneurship. What's entrepreneurship? What's the deal? What's the deal? Well, it goes back to ghetto economics and the fact that it's been Jews and Asians who have run the businesses in the ghettos. Why have blacks not run the businesses in the ghettos? The grocery stores, all kinds of stuff. Why is that? Well, that's a very interesting thing. Again, it's a very difficult thing. It's the kind of thing nobody says out loud. Sociologists in my specialty, that is entrepreneurship, have known throughout But the answer is lack of trust. And I'll get back to that issue. But that has been the tearing, destroying thing that led to Watts and all of the other riots of the long, hot summers in 1965, 1966, 1967, and such. Well, back to the three of us at UT Austin. What we looked into was just the issue of the strangeness of the issue of the ghetto, and also of the entrepreneurial idea, because you see the theory of the middlemen minorities is an anti-entrepreneurial issue. That is that it's not the work of small businessmen or big businessmen or women, but rather it's just the machinations of these middlemen minorities who are keeping life down. So we came up with an idea. Cortes was the leader. He's an immigrant from Cuba who fled Castro's regime and spent some time in Miami, and came up by looking at Little Havana in Miami with a theory. Actually, the three of us came up with a theory. I don't know which one of us did, but we came up with the notion of ethnic enclaves. So we came up with that. Enclaves before that time meant a territory belonging to one country but surrounded by that of another. That's the Webster's Dictionary of the 1960s. And so we transferred that definition over, and it has taken great currency in the United States, as you know. It has, we've got cars, we've got all kinds of things called enclaves now. But the deal was that the ethnic enclaves are used by immigrant entrepreneurs in particular and other ethnic entrepreneurs to get their businesses going and working. As it go? Well, it goes by the co-ethnic members of a neighborhood getting into business and buying and selling from each other. So, if you have a business, a cigar factory, dry cleaners, whatever it might be, your stationer is also a co-ethnic member. You see, your employees are co-ethnics. All of your suppliers are co-ethnics. You're selling to co-ethnics. You're buying and selling amongst yourselves. What's the beauty of this? The beauty of this is location quotients are magnificent. That is, what you have is you have a turnover of the dollar in your own little enclave of like 5 times before it leaves. In other words, you have multiplied your money by 5 times. It's very different from what you think of in the general population. In the general population, you get some money and it leaves your neighborhood instantly. 5 times Ken Wilson and I, in a separate article, we figured all this out through input-output analysis, which we had quite specific, so that we knew exactly what we were talking about. Now, the thing that happens then is that these are magnificently successful, tremendously successful. How can you turn that money over 5 times in your neighborhood without it flowing out? Well, trust. You rely on each other, you love each other, you're going to support each other. It works. And thereby, Little Havana metastasized into, well, control of Miami, but all of the parts of Miami, there are actually 75 cities in Miami, and so the Cubans just spread out and controlled just about everything. It's a fascinating thing. So we looked into this more, and actually I looked into this more. Portis went on to become the president of the American Sociological Society, and Wilson went on to be interested in other things. And so what I did, I decided that I would be the trumpeter of the ethnic enclave's idea. So I started to, did I lose it?
No.
It's still there?
Yes.
Did it still work? And so I started to go to all of the American Sociological Association meetings and presenting papers of other ethnic groups doing the same thing. Now, of course, I ran into Edna Blankosich, who was holding very strongly, tremendously strongly, to the idea of the middlemen minorities. Totally, we were going after the jugular. We were going after that idea. We were destroying that idea. Now, it was very hard to get started because she was in utter control. She was in control of the major journals, all except the very top. Portis and Wilson and I published in the very top journal, which she did not control, but we in sociology have a secondary big-time journal, the American Sociological Review, that she controls, and through her subsidiaries, she controls most of the other journals also. You may or may not know, in academia, it's the journals where everything happens, not books. Now, so I started to trumpet this and got rather readily a big gun to argue with me personally, and I was winning him over. His name's Ivan Light at UCLA, and so that got things going. Also at that first meeting, I went to the Communist Caucus meeting, which was in one of the huge secondary ballrooms at the Convention Hotel. Utterly packed. Edna Blankosich was the leader, and so I just looked in to see what was going on there. Again, communists in full control, sociology, political science, anthropology, et cetera, and on and on. I'll extend that to show how it controls all of academia, in any event, so I did the same thing the next year and the next year, and as a matter of fact, for 18 years, I presented papers on the ethnic enclave notion, drawing many more supporters all the time, actually becoming kind of a big deal, becoming a luncheon speaker for the whole thing, ASA meetings, and so we won them over. I'm going to the Communist Caucus every year, at the same time, I might add, so that I'd be able to have a common reference point. It shrank from several hundred people down, 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 down. By year 18, I went in at the time I allowed time for the meeting to get started to make sure that we were at maximum population for their meeting. Only Ed and Bonasich was sitting there at the front of the room. There were no other communists there. How did this work? Again, it worked because the theory of the middlemen minorities was crushed. I crushed it. The ethnic enclaves was just hugely clear in all my presentations as the way that ethnic enclaves, well, minorities, pull themselves up. You do it by business. Now, the issue here is quite large. Has all this spread out? Again, it spreads out through affirmative action throughout academia. Academia places administrators by affirmative action. Just kind of like looking at TISD last night and seeing the little minions out there, principals and assistant principals. They get into positions of deanships throughout. You're in sociology, that's in arts and sciences perhaps, and the next thing you know, you've got major affirmative action pushes throughout arts and sciences. Yes, sciences. And so things spread out. And so it did throughout the 70s and 80s and 90s, throughout universities. And again, the linchpin would be various things, but one of the fundamental linchpins here is bizarrely the theory of middlemen minorities and its failure. The failure of the idea that whites are keeping blacks down by subterfuge and henchmen. So we won that battle, a huge battle, and it's something that's still going on, of course. However, let's think about this. Universities are still unanimously communist. How does this work? It works through, again, the review process. The review process by NIH, NSF, all of the major federal government granting organizations. The communists did not leave them. They are still there. The communists of the 1970s are still very well in place in the huge granting operations. Again, this might all seem strange to you. Okay, grants, who cares? We've got these educational institutions. Wrong, 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 wrong. If you think of a university as an educational institution, you missed it. You just flippin' missed it. That's not what they are about. Universities, big-time universities, I'm not talking about little places like in East Texas, but the big drivers of everything, it's about research. Why is that? Research is where the money is. Research is why you become a PhD and work up through assistant professor and on up to full professor and such. Those students are in the way. They take time. You got to grade papers. That's not why you did this. You did not become a professor so you could grade papers. No, not a one, not a bloody one. You might have become an instructor so you could do that. You might have become a school teacher so you could grade papers, but you did not do that. A PhD is a research degree. That's what it is. I mean, what's the difference between a master's degree and a PhD? It's research. It's loaded with math and statistics and research methods. That's what you do. You spend an extra, in my case, 6.5 years getting that PhD. At 4 years idea, that's You can never find a 4-year PhD, really. They average 6 to 8 years. You didn't do that so that you could become a better paper grader. You did not. You did that for research. You got deeply into your subject and learned your subject seriously, deeply, and you're good. That's one of those interesting things about a job. When you are good, you know it and you like it. You like your job because you are good. Now, how do you get money for it? You apply for that money. Who's on those review boards that decide whether you get that money or not? I want to tell you, it is a hard, tough deal getting that money. Well, you get approved by the reviewers. Okay, so they figure, hey, that makes a lot of sense. We'll fund that. Almost all of us here today are grown-ups. And know that, no. No. It's political. It's political, for pity's sake. Sure. You agree with my ideas, and I decide that that means that you're really smart, and this will be a really good research project. Therefore, I'll give you $36 million to do that project. Okay? Again, after you start thinking about all this and drawing the various tentacles together, it all starts to make sense. You all start to see what's going on here. Big Ed, the big universities, run the whole show. They run everything. They do the reviews of the articles. They do the reviews for the books. How do we get these stupid geography books that say stupid things? How can you have a stupid geography book, for pity's sake? Okay, I taught geography for 12 years, and I know, well, no, 16 years, on the side, and world regional and U.S. How do you get these stupid things? Well, you get it because large, powerful universities want it stupid. Why do they want it stupid? Because, and this is something to write down, because stupid and communism go together. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Karl Marx was stupid. I have taught Marxism for, well, 37 years. I have the Communist Manifesto pretty much memorized. I do. I really do. And other parts. Of course, that's just great to memorize something that's just perfectly stupid, but it's necessary to understand what the enemy thinks. And I know what the enemy thinks. Now, let's get back to this now. So we got heads of journals, heads of publishing companies, and heads of the most fabulous granting institutions are all stupid. Yes, they are. They're all stupid. Let's see how all this reverberates. Several of you know that I have read the 5th grade social studies books and the 11th grade social studies books. We're talking about massively stupid. But let me point out one that I just love. It is about slavery in the United States. It includes the phrase, however, not every white Southerner owned black slaves. I asked 3 different classes of students, classrooms full of students, how would you interpret the percentage there? What would you say is meant by, however, not every white Southerner owned a black slave? We came to more or less a consensus. That means about 96%. Is this still clear? Oh, time. The actual answer is 4%. 4% of Southern whites owned black slaves. I've run those numbers myself and actually come up with more like 4.5%. It's a rounding error issue. But the real historians through that time who've looked into this would say 4 because they're not demographers. But in any event, fundamental. Blacks throughout Texas have only one teaching event, because it's not repeated in the 11th grade, one teaching event to get an idea of how many whites, what percentage of whites, how likely whites were to have owned black slaves. One shot. 96%. Fundamentally false. Fundamentally false. How can that happen? Well, who writes textbooks for public schools? Very low junior people. I mean, this is Stephen F. Austin kind of writing. They're way out of date yet. Okay, so but how'd they get it through? Well, publishers love it. Again, being stupid. Again, the whole deal is that we've got a nest, just like the federal government. The federal government is, as far as we could possibly guess, is always going to be extremely liberal, regardless of the precedent, because the federal government is just extremely liberal to its very base. I mean, to the secretaries, to the people working in the gardens, it is extremely liberal. Doesn't matter so much who is running the train there. The train's going to have a hard time being on track. Let me get back. A very important thing that I need to tell you. Tell me, just give me the 5, okay? A very interesting thing was going on in the 1970s in sociology. We are quite notable. I've been before the presidents of the National Statistical Association. They tend to be in demography. That's one of my subspecialties. What we did in the 1970s, we came up with a statistical method that is near causal. Causality is a huge issue philosophically and mathematically, but statistics are basically correlational, and so we're saying A and B tend to happen together, and that doesn't mean that much. I remember one of my favorites was in Australia. They found that the tuberculosis rate and the installation of telephone poles were greatly correlated. So correlation means nothing. But we came up with path analysis, and we learned a whole lot about that. We knew a lot. As we were learning a lot, we were able to break through a lot of this racial issue and find out that a lot of the pathology in the ghetto was caused by the ghetto people. Well, we had to break off from that because that was too embarrassing, so we dropped path analysis. We only had one more near causal analysis to happen in the 70s and 80s. That was in 1987 by a man named Sampson, who came up and saw that indeed the pathology in the ghetto was self-caused. But that was the last one. What have we done in all of the social sciences since then? All of them. We've gone to ordinary least squares as a method to establish our base. It's a very modest method. It's one, as a matter of fact, that I've always been above and never even learned it in my various statistics courses. But it was one that was created for coming up with very positive results for the far left. That's all you can find now. In political science and sociology, anthropology, all of the social sciences, you can't find anything but very modest statistical levels, measures. Again, can you imagine? We have gone way down. We could be at the level of actual causal analysis now, but we dropped it politically. Why did we drop it? The answer is because we're stupid. Meaning communist. We don't want to know the truth. We don't want to say this is the way it works. Because communism doesn't work. If you know how things work, you're not a communist. Okay? It all fits together. I know I've hit you with far too much. I know you're just shaking your head and saying, what the heck is he talking about? But nevertheless, that's, I'd be happy to talk with anybody who would like me to say. What I was trying to say was, and we can maybe get into that in greater detail after the meeting, anybody who would like to pursue this. Okay, so I'm 3 for 3 now in my presentations with you, being bizarre, and I hope you appreciate bizarreness. I mean, you've got to say that you just got to get away from the Dr. Tim Kaine sort of thing, where he goes through step by step, logically, slowly builds you up, and you say, oh, I've got it, and I've learned something. So we've got to do far better than that, and you're welcome.